Brendan, you made a film called Mad Bastards in 2010, which has had tremendous repercussions. But first, tell us about the origins of Mad Bastards.
Look, I started going up to the Kimberley. I'm from Sydney originally. I started going up to the Kimberley in the 90s, sort of mid to late 90s. Ostensibly to work with some brothers up there, the Pigram brothers, musicians, and make music videos for them and so forth. But I think there's no denying it was a bit of a personal odyssey as well, you know. I was in my mid-20s, I suppose, at that stage, early to mid-20s. And I connected with the Pigram brothers, of which there are 9, and I was a year younger than the youngest one. So I'm the eldest in my family. So for me it was like having just a gaggle of older brothers who were just all about fishing and camping and fixing things and, you know, real, something I was sort of looking for. I mean, I always loved fishing and always had a thing for the bush and so forth, but I found a big arena for that, you know, and the respect that they afforded me and the kind of creative connection that we made. I suppose that's the other thing, is that up until then, for me, as a creative person, it had always been a bit wussy, you know, whereas I loved having this bunch of guys that, you know, were all about kind of hunting and playing sport and then could discuss the sort of qualities of a lyrical melody, you know. So I essentially moved up there, you know, on and off for 5 years, I suppose, and through the Pigram brothers met a lot of men that inspired me. And I suppose I felt like I'd seen so many negative stories about Aboriginal men, almost 100%, you know. And I just met men who had changed their lives and had, really inspired by their families, made utter change of course on their lives, and I felt very inspired by that.
Did you know about that because they told you? How did you find out about these changes in their lives?
Yeah, I mean, they told. I mean, I lived in the community, and gradually their kids would say something, or their wives would say something, and then they might say something, and you sort of put the narrative together through a whole collection of stories. And it wasn't like that happened on the first weekend. It took a long time and a lot of levels of trust and a lot of fishing trips to get to that point.
But and were you consciously looking for that kind of information? It just came to you, right?
Yeah.
But then your antenna began.
Yeah.
To work.
Exactly. I mean, I as a filmmaker, you look for stories, but I'd been a documentary maker. You know, I was at 2001. We had the name Mad Bastards, right? We didn't have a story. We'd made a short film called Cullyfoot with the Pigram brothers that was about a kind of a young 12 or 13-year-old boy and his older cousin brother, and the cousin brother goes to Sydney to play for the Sydney Swans, and he's on a parallel timeline. The younger brother is going fishing, sort of without his elder for the first time. So we'd made a film that was kind of a little bit, looking back, about men and growing up and brothers and so forth. And I just thought there's a texture here that is interesting cinematically and that I haven't seen before, that I think is really cool. You know, I'd love to make this into a movie, and the film did pretty well as a short film, and well, let's make a long one then, you know. So, and everyone would call each other Mad Bastards. It was hilarious, you know, as a kind of a compliment in a way. It was a sort of you're a little bit crazy, but I like you, you know, and there was something very masculine about that. And so we were sort of trying to put parts of stories together initially for Mad Bastards in the early days, but when I met some of these men that told me very specific life stories and very moving life stories, I just went, okay, here's the movie, you know. Now, because of our process of making the film, where we wanted to make it with those people who told us the stories, we went through quite a few iterations of people and story, and guys that we worked with ending up getting locked up, and, you know, like we had a lot of barriers by virtue of the process. to actually getting that story to the stage where it could be financed, you know, and made. But they were all just kind of different takes on the same thing, you know, and in a sense, some of the false starts were men who changed their lives, and, you know, what we discovered is that the change is something that you commit to every day, you know, and it's not a finite journey. We kind of learnt it the hard way, you know.
When did when did Dean come into the picture? Who plays the TJ?
Yeah, look, Dean, I met quite late in a way. I mean, we met about 2007 or 2008, and he's a Nyunga, he's from Perth, and he was living in Broome, and I was living in Broome, and he'd sort of heard we were making a film, and I knew he'd been a grip, and I knew people who knew him, and we met up with the intention of trying to get, we're trying to get as many blackfellas as we could, especially local guys, to work on the film. And I met him with the intention of talking about being a grip, and as soon as I met him, I just thought, this guy's a movie star. I mean, he's just got such a great presence, you know. And he was very kind of standoffish and tough guy, and, you know, and I sort of said to him I think maybe even at the end of the first meeting, you know, you should have a crack at the other side of the camera, bro, you know. And he, that's not my thing, you know. And he sort of pushed it away, but I kind of felt like, you know, there was a pretty good chance that he would actually want to have a go. So it took a bit of courting, and, you know, he didn't trust us. I mean, he trusted the Pigram brothers, you know, but he had a lot of experiences before that let him down, and so it took him a while to feel good about, feel open and ready enough to sort of put himself out there. And look, from sort of the first screen test, I just thought, okay, he's great. He's great. He's raw and kind of undisciplined in a way. He had done some acting, as it turns out, and he'd been around film sets, so he actually knew quite a lot. But that rawness was exactly what we were after. So, you know, and then, you know, we had developed the story with these Kimberley blackfellas, and I said, and then for all those reasons of, you know, some of them just didn't have the capacity to act in a movie, a multi-million-dollar movie. And I was just scratching my head, just thinking, oh, how are we ever going to do this? And we had Dean and also Greg, who plays the policeman, Texas, who had come to us late, really, if you think of 2001, 2007. And I thought, well, maybe these guys can be the main dudes, you know. So we discussed the story, and they both said, I'd love to, but that's not my story. I can't. You want something authentic? You know, I can give it to you, but that's not my story. So then we kind of, you know, I think we even had the funding by this stage. So I then had to pull up all the tent pegs of the whole thing, and, you know, TJ was never, his name was the same the whole time, but he was never a city guy. You know, he was always a Kimberley fella up until then. But we basically did a page one rewrite, getting TJ to be entering to the Kimberley from the city, and making his adversary, or the antagonist, someone that is a cop, because Greg Tate was a policeman from Halls Creek, and I just thought that's really unusual. Blackfella policeman, haven't seen that in that the sort of character he was in the film, haven't seen that before very much. And so yeah, just completely rewrote it based on the stories that Greg and Dean told us in sort of 6 to 12 months. It actually happened really quickly, but, you know, same story, just different expression.
That story in Mad Bastards, which is the central core, the central well of that story, is a kind of a redemption story. And it's an important story, and the film has gone on to become part of the, if you like, tools of men's health and groups that you are involved with. Just tell us a little bit about how the film is used and where it interconnects with those communities who can use it.
Sure. Well, while we were gallivanting around the world last year, going to Sundance and Shanghai and Ireland and the Czech Republic...
With the film?
With the film. The communities around Australia gradually started to get a hold of the film, and they were contacting us all over the place. Like, I can't even, you know, Roma in Queensland, Tasmania, Redfern, Northern Victoria, Fremantle, Balgo in the Kimberley, Groot Island. I mean, we just had emails and phone calls from all these different connections just saying, we want to use this film and we want to use it with our community meaningfully. What, you know, what is there anything can you help us, you know? And that was sometimes we would go there, we'd bring whoever we could, Dean or Greg or, you know, the Pigram brothers would come and they'd play music. And it was a senior doctor from Cape York, Dr. Mark Winnetong, who I think is the fifth ever, he was the fifth bloke made a Aboriginal doctor ever in Australia, wrote just an incredible email to us about the power of the film, and he said, you guys should actually get something structured, because to send this film to communities without a framework and without support is actually dangerous, because it's so powerful that it can show paths to change, but it can also open up old wounds. And let's use it, but let's use it. Let's be thoughtful about this. So basically, through Mark, you know, we set up a kind of over quite a long, you know, 6 to 12 months. It took us to set up a working group of Aboriginal doctors and health professionals, about 6 people, and they identified themes of the film that would connect with communities. And, you know, we started realising we could use this for women's shelters, for, you know, in prisons, fatherhood foundations, you know, kind of reconciliation. I mean, there's so many uses for it. But we went, well, let's just start with men. And while this was happening, we got a phone call from the Men's Sheds organisation, which is huge in Australia. I mean, they have, I think, 600 or 700 sheds, and it's growing like crazy. And they said, look, do you reckon you guys could come down to the lodge and meet Tim Matheson, where he really wants to talk to you about the film and how you could use it, you know, with the Men's Sheds Association. So we went down and had scrambled eggs with the lodge. You know, I had TJ in the lodge, you know, which was kind of amazing to see. Have scrambled eggs, you know, at the Prime Minister's table, you know, and they're playing the Mad Bastard soundtrack, and Tim's like, oh yeah, Julie and I love this, you know, when we have guests over, we've been playing it all the time, and, you know, just something that you never expect, you know. Anyway, so I guess I'm saying all this because, you know, we're not men's health experts, you know, we're kind of musicians and actors and filmmakers, but we responded to the community coming to us, and we thought, well, if we're going to do it, we should really do it properly. So I've been just amazed to see these Aboriginal, the working group, come back to us. I mean, I just sort of sit there, they all do the thinking, and I'm just amazed watching them think about the film that we made and interpret the film we made. And they've come up with the themes of the film: deciding to change, taking responsibility, family relationships, identity, transformation, and staying strong.
So these are the themes that have been identified as the skeleton of what is going to be discussed after seeing the film. Is that right?
Exactly.
Can we take a look then at the first one that's been identified? Let's look at a scene from the film. You introduce it for us.
Sure.
Where is it as an example of
Sure.
taking that first theme of deciding to change?
Sure. Well, you've identified the theme of redemption in the film, and redemption has to start by taking action. And we found that there was always a moment when someone starts to go from a certain path of behaviour to another path. And in this scene, TJ is visiting his brother in jail, and they both have sons, and his brother, being locked up, can't see his son, and this starts TJ thinking about his own life.
Those rooms? Take her in. What's this thing?
Well, what do you reckon it is?
You know the rules.
You fucking men in uniform, huh?
Your brother's waiting.
He's my blood, bro. Just like you. Mum won't even let him talk to me.
They brought him in here to visit you, or what?
What do you reckon? Mum and Candy grow him up now. They probably tell him his dad's dead. So how old's yours now?
No, what?
I thought you went up there to visit him.
Yeah, I was gonna. Yeah, it's a long fucking way.
I just got one thing to say to you. Don't leave it too late, Thomas. Here. Made it myself. Woodwork class.
Go on, I can see that.
Skillen's birthday this weekend. Turned 6.
Ah, no. Nah, bro. No way.
Come on, bro, just take it to him. He's at Mum's.
True, brother. Mum don't like me more than she don't like you.
TJ, Coulda, please.
It shows us, and it shows everybody what power the moving image, what a movie can do. So, it's in a way for me, it's a confirmation that a movie is not just a movie. It can be something that alters lives, and in this case, it has. Do you have any? Have you got now at this stage any anecdotes of how it has changed somebody's life?
Yeah, we get stories all the time, and I ran into an artist, just a guy really who had spent time in the Central Desert, and he said to me that there's a guy that is in one of those Central Desert communities that watches Mad Bastards every week, and he said that he is kind of on the edge. He's kind of a TJ of being able to hold his life together, but when my friend said that he knew the guys that made Mad Bastards, he just said that watching that every week helps me know that it's possible, you know, and helps me know that I guess just gives him hope, you know. And that's, you know, we need to be careful. We didn't make a movie to change the world, and we're not psychologists and we're not health workers and so forth. But I do think that it's important to look at the stories that you tell. And with all my films, I feel a sort of a responsibility. And I think that people are. I think there's a need for healthy and holistic storytelling. I think people want that when they go to the movies. Not everyone, and not every movie, myself included, but there's a huge tradition of myth and stories by the campfire, and, you know, especially in blackfella culture, but in every culture, of stories making sense of the world. And, you know, we got a great award last week from the Minister of Community Services, Julie Collins, for Child Protection Week. We got the award for the initiative of the year of protecting children. I don't think a film has ever won that award before, you know.
Nor did you set out to do that.
I didn't know it existed, you know. Definitely didn't set out to do that. But what a great award to get when you're making a film, you know.
I suspect that making the film and the after effects of the film, the impact the film has had, has changed your life a bit.
Yeah, I mean, I was so in the film, making the film. I mean, I did all sorts of really quite irrational things to get this film financed and get this film made.
Because?
because that was the only way it was going to get made. I mean, films are so hard to
But
make.
you wanted to make it because?
Well, I guess that's what I'm saying. I don't know why, really, actually. I just really wanted to make it, you know. And only since that's happened, and when we finished it, I thought, oh, this is a crap movie, no one's going to want to watch it. And, you know, we had all these distribution problems. And then, sort of as we were making it, and then after we finished it and we screened it and we got a great distributor and things started to turn around almost instantaneously, you know. Making it was just unbelievably challenging and difficult and stressful. So because of all that, I didn't really know what I'd made or why I'd made it at all. But since this has happened, and since you start to get a bit of distance from the film, and people ask you questions about the film, and they tell you the themes of the film, all sort of stuff, you kind of go, oh, I guess that's what it's about, you know. I guess that's what, and that can't help but make you think about why you made the film, and you know. And I suppose, you know, it's a line from the film, you know, everyone needs a father figure, every man particularly, you know. And Dean said it beautifully last week when he accepted this award in Tassie, you know. He said, it's a lot easier to build strong children than to repair broken men, you know. And there's just some sort of guiding force that I think a strong paternal figure can have. It doesn't always come from the father. It doesn't always come from a male, even, you know. But there is a certain authority and guidance and know-how and wisdom that comes from strong men in other men's lives, you know. And I think that I understand now that's part of why I made this film, even personally.
Because personally you had? What sort of a...
Well, you know, I have a collection of, you know, my father's is going pretty strong, and, you know, he's, you know, he's been, I grew up in a very stable family and, you know, have always had a father figure. But I suppose the sort of father that he wasn't the sort of father that I found in the Kimberley. He wasn't, you know, and isn't kind of an outdoor sort of a guy, and I was just, it took me a long time to kind of realise that I kind of wanted to rub up against that really raw kind of masculine power. And my dad has his own strengths in different ways, you know. But that raw masculine power is quite dangerous as well, you know, and can be quite dark. And Mad Bastards is all about that. And I suppose, you know, I went through my own darkness making the film, and my own challenges and my own loneliness in a lot of ways, and found my own inspiration in the men that I came across when making the film.
You say you had a happy upbringing, it
Yeah.
was a great family and so forth. Were you ever in a situation where you didn't know who to turn to for advice, maybe about anger management or relationships?
I would say often. I think the film is about someone who doesn't have that person and who has a lot of anger that's been repressed or been, you know, kind of stored up. And I can totally relate to that. You know, I still have that sort of sense in my life, you know. And it's only since I've understood that, and understood that through making my own films, that I've been able to really start to change that, you know. And there's, you know, another film I'm working on at the moment that I'm just writing, where it's amazing how much you learn through stories that you want to tell about yourself, you know. And this particular film, I mean, it's about a father and a son. And I don't even have kids, you know. It's amazing how you're drawn to these things. But the anger and there's a lot of, I guess the repressed feelings, I suppose, that have been unexpressed for so long, completely tear this guy's life apart. And the film is about, in a very different way to Mad Bastards, very different context, is about someone trying to make a change in that, you know.
If you were to identify a point at which that decision to change is made, as we did with the film Mad Bastards. Have you learned anything about how that is brought about? What can trigger that kind of decision in somebody?
Yeah, I think I can. I mean, personally, and in the film, and by virtue of the characters the real people that inspired the film, almost always it's a loss of relationships, or it's a sense of being alone. It's a sense of either having lost or about to lose precious relationships, usually with family, you know. And you know something's got to change, you know. That's ultimately, I think that loneliness and that aloneness is just too painful.
Does that feed into one of the other elements and themes that was identified, and that's the question of identity? Does that feed into that question of what am I, who am I?
Definitely. I mean, identity has different meanings for every person, but I suppose there's this whole sense of becoming someone when you're going from adolescence to an adult, whether you're a man or a woman. Kind of who are you, and how does who you are give you strength, and how does how you define yourself and how others define you, how does that make you happy or give you confidence or give you kind of life force and life energy to draw on? How can you be proud of that, you know? And that's critical. And even for me personally, I mean, only after I made the film did I mean, really only in the last few months, to be honest, did I actually realise I was a filmmaker. Even though I've been making films for 10 or 15 years. I'd sort of been almost denying it or not taking it seriously because it was too much of a risk if I took it seriously. But one of the big things that happened to me, let me go back a step, to acknowledge that I was a filmmaker and a kind of a creative person before I made Mad Bastards would have meant that if I made it and it was shit, that would have been too crippling, I think, for me, from my identity, you know. So I think in a sense I didn't engage with it at all. It was always this, so I somehow managed to sort of keep it at bay and think I'm just doing this for a few years and...
Reduce the risk.
Reduce the risk because of the potential pain you'll have to face, you know. And it was only that Mad Bastards did okay, you know, that I think, you're always guessing, aren't you? But I think that's why I've been able to allow myself to embrace that. And now that I've embraced that, my life is quite different, because if you go, all right, holus bolus, grab the bull by the horns, yes, I want to make goddamn films for a living, right, what do I have to change now to do that? You know, what do I have to take seriously to pursue that? What behaviours or what things about my life do I have to work on?
We talked about the changes that making the film has had on you, and by implication we see how TJ/Dean has changed his life by making that decision to change. But I wonder if, as an observer of Dean Deli-Jones now, as distinct from Dean Deli-Jones before you started making the film, can you talk about the change beyond what the film tells us?
I mean, I used to know which stool at the pub to find Dean on, you know. No good having a phone number, you know. And he had, and he still has, and he'll tell you that, demons, serious demons that he had to get through in order to make the film, you know. And to go, you know, when I met Dean, I mean, a couple of times I just had to pay the $125 for him to get a room at the caravan park, you know, for a week or something in Broome, because he had no other options, you know, when he was fighting with his partner and family rejected him, and he had all these kind of dramas coming in his life. So he had less than nothing, you know. And to see him give a speech last week to the Commissioner for Children, the Lord Mayor of Hobart, and the Community Services Minister. I mean, I got up there with my little piece of paper and made my speech, and the other state winner had a beautiful speech written. And Dean just got up and he just talked, and it was, I mean, he had people in tears, and I mean, that change is extraordinary. And I'll tell you one story actually, which illustrates it very well, is that we finished the main block of filming after 6 weeks, and we actually finished more or less with the scene where Dean's character TJ talks to his son Bullock, kind of for the first time outside in the backyard. And I said to Dean, you know, kind of at the wrap party, I'll see you back in Broome, you know, because we were filming about 1,000 k's from Broome, and see you back next week, we'll catch up. No worries, bro. And then I rang him 2 or 3 days later, and I said, let's catch up. He goes, oh, I'm in Perth. Oh, for him to make that big change that quickly is very unusual, you know, because it's something to find the money for a ticket. And I said, well, what are you doing in Perth? He said, I've been saying all these words to my movie son, Bullet, in the film, and I should have been saying it to my son. I just had to see him. And he didn't go back to Broome. You know, like he changed in an instant. He just went to Owen, because Owen is the same age as his son in the film, like almost weirdly, exactly. You know?
Well, but that was why he wanted to tell his story.
I think it was. I think it really was. I mean, there was always that relationship in the film, but he was brave enough to own that, and he was brave enough to be vulnerable with the texture of that relationship, you know. And last week, he took Owen to these awards, you know, and I just can't believe it, you know. I mean...
and can you put it down to... I don't want to put words into your mouth. What do you think it was? Was it as simple as that? Was it him?
It's not as simple as anything, and,
No.
and he still struggles. Struggles is the wrong word. He still has to keep committing to being a man. I mean, he says in the film at the end credits, he says, I only started being a man a couple of years ago. What I would put it down to is that, and he says this himself, he put his hand up and he said, I want to change, I need some help. And he had to go to a counsellor for his court order, and it forced him to start talking, and by accidentally getting support, the support doesn't make you change, but it supports you to make changes you want to make. And everyone, you look at the film, that's why relationships is the theme, every one of the characters who makes a change in the film is supported by someone. And it started by conversations with aunties, with family, with friends, or men in a men's group, or with professional services, you know. You can't do it alone. And men don't even get to the first stage because we all don't want to say anything. We all don't, I mean, even like I said about myself, we don't even want to say it to ourselves, you know. Yet you've got all these, and you've got all these behaviours around anger, you know, on both ends of the anger spectrum, that is pushing people away, and you end up stuffing up all these relationships, and it breaks your heart, and you just feel even worse. You don't even want to talk about it, because then somehow that's your identity, and you know. So look, to answer your question, I think Dean's brave decision about putting his hand up and kind of acknowledging where he was at, and that he wanted to make a change was key, and that he keeps making that.
Do you believe anybody can do it?
I think you cannot underestimate how hard it is to go through these, to make a change. And I would like to think anybody can do it, and I would also say that it's easier for some than others. But if you believe that and you commit to wanting to have a better life, you can do it, but you can't do it alone, I don't think. You know.
What role does religion, spirituality, faith and culture have in all of this, do you think? For all, black and white?
It's a big question. I think there's no doubt that having a belief in something can really kind of help in all those areas of identity and support, connecting with a network of other people and so forth. And personally, you know, I think it's hard not to. Sorry, I have to. This is such a big question. I'm just having to think about it.
Let me ask you something specifically rather than generally.
That'd be good. Yeah.
Let me ask you about the role of spirituality, for want of, you know, a broad word, meaning, do I believe in spirituality, which could be anything, whatever you want it to be?
Sure.
Is there something other than just what we see? Is there, you know, is humanity, for example, is part of spirituality? And how important do you think it is for people to recognize that there is such a thing as spirituality to make that change?
I mean, I just want to talk about it personally because I think everyone has their own relationship to that subject. But for me, I grew up Catholic, and I wouldn't really say I'm Catholic now, but a lot of the elements of that practice stayed with me and allowed me to see and respect that in other cultures and other religious beliefs and spiritualities. Like I said, I feel like I went on a bit of an odyssey, you know, a bit of a journey when I ended up in Broome, and I've always felt a real affinity with the land of Australia, and I always felt an animation about the land and a connection to the land and the stories. Being white, you know. And I remember that I had this... What I felt about my Catholic religion was that it was old and it was kind of dusty and full of cobwebs and kind of hollow as far as the practice goes, you know, and somehow outdated, and there's something about it that was good.
Not relevant.
Yeah, not relevant and kind of not visceral and not, you know, kind of good ideas at the heart of it, but it just didn't fit, you know. But then going up to the Kimberley and hanging out with all the, you know, the Aboriginal guys, and I mean, it was like a slap across the face for me, in a really good way. It was like, wow, you can be really manly and you can connect with the land, you can be sensitive, you know, it's to do with connecting you as a person to your place in a system of relationships and language and religion and food and animals, and, you know, it felt very respectful. It felt connected. It felt like through this particular spirituality, you knew your place, and your place was a powerful place, and it was your own place, your own identity. And it just blew me away, you know. And you know, you can't really convert to Aboriginality, you know. It's sort of, it's not like that. You can sort of allow it to sort of influence how you believe, for sure. But, you know, there's a whole lot of stuff about, you know, it's just not like, it's not like a religion that you can pick up, you know. But what happened though is that I started to identify with a lot of that, and I started to be allowed to connect with it in a way, you know. And people used to say to me, "Oh, you're so lucky, man, you go to Broome all the time," and, you know. And I'm like, Well, I do buy the tickets myself, you know, and I do sacrifice making a living down here to not make a living up there. It's something that you have to, it's not some magical plucking out of the universe. Again, you have to work and you have to commit to something and you have to give to it. But I remember I was fishing once, but after, I don't know, 5 or 10 years or something, I kind of knew the fishing spots, I knew the bait, I didn't have to go with the boys anymore, like I felt like a certain, and this one day there's a certain sort of fish called a giddet fish, which I don't know what they all call it a giddet. It's like, I think it's a Maori wrasse is the English name. Really beautiful, got the Maori designs on its face, and it's like a green snapper, but incredibly beautiful, powerful fish, and it's very well respected up in the Kimberley. Anyway, I was with one of the piggies actually, and we were trying to catch this certain sort of fish, and we couldn't catch it. We were there for 2 or 3 days. Anyway, Pete's asleep under it's so hot, he's asleep under the car in the shade, and I'm fishing by myself, and I just caught like the ultimate giddet, like this really nice, big, fat, and it just flapped around on the rocks, and I just looked sort of everywhere and went, thank you, I don't know whether that's to God or the land, it didn't matter though, I just was so, that moment, everything connected, and it kind of caught me by surprise, and I went back and I was trying to casually wake Pete up, kicking him and da-da-da, and he took one look at the fish and he leapt up and he goes, you classy prick, And I suppose that's what I was looking for in a way, a kind of a spirituality that you could live in, and it could be utterly profound, but it can be part of your life, and it can be meaningful,
You said a couple of times, and I want to pick you up on it and just tease this idea out a little bit, because you said a couple of times about you mentioned it in passing, that sensitivity was very much part of the package. Mm. Manliness didn't exclude sensitivity in that cultural setting. So in other words, that's one of the building blocks of identity in a way. Can you talk a little bit more about the sort of things that you mean about that, about sensitivity? What are the references?
Yeah, I suppose it goes back to what captivated me about the Kimberley and the Aboriginal men I came across that led to the film, was that they'd be around the fire telling you about this bloodbath, that they'd had this massive bar fight, and you're talking about guys who, there's wild cattle in the Kimberley, right? And if the cattle are unbranded and they're on Aboriginal land or any land, you can kill them and eat them. They're working. Before we had the title Mad Bastards, we had the title Killer, because it said they call it going to get a killer, and they literally come back with hindquarters, and stick them in the freezer, and and there's a whole kind of interesting mythology around that. But you're talking about guys that will be riding on the side of a ute with a knife between their mouths, and will no roads, like you're through this kind of rough and tough world, through this landscape, and they kind of come up near a wild cattle with these massive horns, and they jump off and they spin, they grab its tail, they spin it, and then they take the knife out of their mouths, jump down and slit the throat. Like, you're talking about serious life-threatening hunting stuff, And then they start talking about their grandmother, and they just break down in tears, like in the next minute, or their kids, and that was not just. Wasn't excuse. It wasn't like embarrassing or excusing. It was part of being a man, And I just thought, I think that's empowering.
You instinctively responded to that.
Yeah.
You felt I understand that.
Very much I understand that, and I don't see that in the world I'm in. I see a lot of kind of posturing, tough posturing, and then you see all the sort of stereotypes we know about men, and if you're a bit soft you must be a poof, and all that silly stuff, that's just so immature, really, and or girlish or whatever, but just stuff that it seems to deliberately exclude a huge part of being a man, you know, about caring and empathy and compassion and sensitivity and, you know, just that knocked me out, you know. And I suppose, you know, I hadn't really encountered men who were, in a sense, that full package, you know, in such a lived-in, you know, powerful way for me.
It's hard to find them in the city.
Well,
They're there, but it's hard to find them.
yeah, I mean, not to, you know, they're not riding on newts with knives between their teeth, but, you know, it taught me that, okay, everyone's a product of their environment, so how can you embody the full man in your life, you know, and how can you see that in other people?
Final question, it might sound flippant, but I'm serious. Do you think you're happier now than you were before you made Mad Bastards, before you had that experience?
I'm undoubtedly happier now, and I mean, it was impossible to make that movie. What we did was impossible. We had so many challenges, and it was so hard. And I think it was a journey of, you know, if you, as a man, it was another odyssey. You know, it was trying to go on a bit of a voyage, and I just thought, I don't care if it's crap. No, I don't care if it's crap. If it's crap, it's crap. If no one likes it, that's okay. I need to do this. And I was just not going to stop. Even if I shot the whole thing myself and made it for, you know, 10 grand, that was always the last resort. So going on that journey and going through all of the kind of the pain of making it and the sacrifice of making it, it took a long time. It took nearly 10 years. I learned so much about myself, and I discovered so much about myself. I discovered so much about the world and about our country. I'm so happy because of that, and I've made so many great relationships and so many unusual relationships that I still learn from. You know, I'm thrilled.
Thank you very much.
No worries.